There we go. We're live. Hello and welcome to the third episode of Fanning Out, in which we will be talking about cartoons and the impact that they've had on our lives. And I guess we'll talk about any movie adaptations and video game adaptations. I guess there will hopefully be a special guest joining us later in the program. He said he was going to be a wee bit late, so we'll just wait. And until then, we'll talk about cartoons. Maddie's list of cartoons was 3 cartoons long. It was Transformers, Robotech, aka Macross, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Zachary's cartoon was about 50 cartoons long, literally. I'm not exaggerating. But my cartoon would have also been equally as long. So the cartoons I grew up on, you probably have heard of, or may have even grown up with, Thundercats and Silverhawks. And Galaxy Rangers. Galaxy Rangers, heroes in the sky. No guts, no glory. The best thing about that show was the theme song. I'll tell you what put me off that show, because it was distributed by Saban, who were the distributors of Power Rangers. And so, when I was younger, I didn't understand that there's distributors and producers, and I just thought, oh, they must be the... And because of the titles, both ending in Rangers, Galaxy Rangers and Power Rangers, I just assumed that they were somehow set in the same universe. So I just had a negative assumption of Galaxy Rangers, even though what little I've seen of it on YouTube, I probably would have enjoyed it had I just sat down and watched it.
So you had a negative opinion because you felt it encroached on the universe of the other, or just because
because I didn't like Power Rangers, even though I went.
Oh, right, okay, I get it.
Yeah, right. So, but nothing.
I found the original Transformers.
Sorry, go, Matty.
Power Rangers. I found the original Power Rangers very amusing, and I definitely find that their Japanese counterparts handle the tongue-in-cheek nature of it far better. But that's not cartoon, so we won't go there. That's for another time.
Oh, no, yeah. Actually, we'll have that as a theme. Maybe when we do Japanese pop culture, or we'll do like live-action cartoon, like live-action shows that could easily be cartoons.
Or something.
The entire Power Rangers catalog.
Power Rangers, Kamen Rider,
all of
other.
Yeah.
Whatever else falls into that category. There's a new Power Ranger movies in the works as we speak.
As in our American Power Rangers.
Yes. Writers and producers from the X-Men and Spider-Man franchises are going to Power Rangers, which has put Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man 3 on hold.
Oh, well, I'm sure everybody's so upset about that.
I'm a little upset, but I wasn't sure where that franchise was going. To tell you the truth, I'd rather see a new decent Power Rangers film than a third Spider-Man film.
Agreed.
And especially since the writers and producers, that they're going to try and approach it like a serious but fun film, like sort of the Avengers film, like that level of seriousness / fun. Having
one thing.
Yeah, go.
One thing I'd like to see taken from, and this is a little segue back into the cartoons, is a fourth cartoon that I forgot to mention that we've discussed before. It had very limited airplay in Australia, and I don't know if it made it to America, but here it was known as Transor Z, but the original Japanese title was Mazinger Z.
Oh, Mazinger Z.
That's the one. That would be brilliant, live action.
Yeah. Excuse me 1 minute. There is a spider making his way across my floor.
Species?
It's a spider. That's all it has to be. Okay. No, I don't want to use this. Big.
Use the cheapest book in the bookshelf to squish it.
Don't spray it. It could be female. It might lay emergency eggs for the survival of its species.
Okay, come on, a little bit closer, a little bit closer, a little bit closer. This way. This way. Crawl over the freaking cord already, damn it.
Do you crush it with your foot?
No, I got an old sketchbook. Aha!
Is it heavy enough?
Shit! Yes! Victory! Victory for humankind!
That was exciting.
You got it? It's dead and squished?
Oh, very dead. And very squished.
Green blood?
Whatever the hell you would call that color. It's not green.
Blood crowds?
Well, at least it's not a chrysalid.
Yeah. Okay, getting...
Okay. Back on topic, aside from things that are trying to kill me. I will give it this much credit. The spiders we have here are not nearly as terrifying as the spiders you have there. Yeah. So...
Right. Did you encounter any spiders here? You must have seen a huntsman at least once while you were here.
We had a huntsman in the house once.
Right. They're actually harmless, believe it or not.
They're part of the lease. There's a subclause in the last page that includes a minimum of at least 2 huntsmen per house in Australia.
Yeah, my roommate basically, my roommate took a picture of it and he goes, "Yeah, this was in our house last night." And he shows me this picture of this face hugger, and I said, "How big was he?" He goes, "Oh, but that big." I grabbed the phone book and I said, "Where'd he go?" And I was like, "Where'd he go?" And he goes, "Oh, he went under the couch." If this were back to cartoon, if this was a cartoon, it would have been like 12 seconds later. Me standing out of the phone book, move the couch.
Fantastic. Now let's talk about cartoon. That was an animated experience that you had with the spiders.
It certainly was.
Yeah.
But, what was it? Translaw Z?
Translaw Z for limited run.
I think it was. Yeah, I think in the States it was called Mazinger Z.
Yeah, and the Japanese is Mazinger Zeto or something. Mazinger
Zeto. I'm just looking it up on YouTube. I've seen the toys and the action figures of this.
Yeah, I just looked it up. Mazinger Z, Translaw Z in the U.S.
Kind of like a Voltron kind of thing.
No, he was like he was a robot built by an aging scientist, and the little pilot dude flew like a little ship, landed in the robot's head, and then it charged out, and it had a fist that went and flew off the arm, and it was great. Yeah, I loved it.
See these kinds of toys, they're probably the knockoff ones in like the $2 shop.
But you press the button and it goes on a little spring.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I never saw that, but it's something that I probably would have loved as a child.
I barely remember the storylines, and I don't remember the villains at all, but for some reason it stuck with me all these years later, and it took me a long time, until we had the internet to actually find out what the heck it was called. But the robot was great. I love the imagery.
There was actually there was one that I used to watch. It only got one season in the U.S. 13 episodes were produced, called Road Rovers, by the same team that did Animaniacs and Tiny Toons. And I remember watching as a kid, and I thought it was one of the coolest things ever because I love dogs, and it was basically the idea that all these different dogs that were like the dogs that belonged to the leaders of the world nations.
Yeah.
Came together as a superhero team. It got really the concept was weird alone, and for a long time. Yeah.
Were they
for a long
human?
time.
Humanoid dogs.
They would become humanoid. It was like a transformation process. They'd become like anthropomorphic humanoid dogs. It was kind of creepy when you think about it in retrospective, but I remember for the longest time nobody remembered the show but me. And so finally, I looked it up on Wikipedia, Googled it, like YouTubed it, and I found the opening. I watched the opening. I'm like, yes, this is the show I was talking about. Nobody believed me. I look at the first comment on the top comment on the video, and it says, I found it. I found it. Nobody believed me. This was real, but I found it.
Awesome.
When you guys just clicked on the link, right? And that,
yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Just copy and pasted it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that. Hopefully he'll be here soon if everything's working out for him. But speaking of cartoons that nobody remembers, I've seen other things like that on YouTube because the comments were like, "Oh my god, I thought I dreamt of this cartoon." When they found the theme songs, it was called Spartacus and the Sun Beneath the Sea.
Ooh.
A fantastic theme song. Didn't like the cartoon at all. One of my all-time favorite cartoon theme songs.
I remember a cartoon that was set in, like, I remember ancient Aztec ruins, and they flew around in a flying bird thing. And the theme song for that, was brilliant, but I can't fucking remember what that was called.
Mysterious Cities of Gold.
Oh, is that what you were just talking about?
No. You were just talking... Oh, Spartacus and the Sun Beneath the Sea was actually a French cartoon dubbed into American. Mysterious City of Gold, I think, was a French-Japanese cartoon. Like a French company.
It was.
Japanese company. And yeah, someday we will find the cities of gold. That one?
Nice.
Yeah.
Sweet.
It had a real action flair.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. There's actually I only discovered it because of YouTube. It was called basically this guy was talking about forgotten superheroes or something and he did like a top 10 like underrated or most unknown superhero like best lost cartoons or something like that. And he was going down this list and he got to number 1 is this Argentinian. It was based on an Argentinian comic book adapted by like the Japanese and released briefly I think in Canada and briefly on US TV, and it was called Cyber 6.
Ooh.
And the plot of it was, you can find it on YouTube, or if you find it any cartoon streaming sites, you can watch the entire short series. Mm-hmm. It was a 13-episode production, but it was basically about this Nazi scientist escaped to Argentina during World War II and continued doing genetic experiments and was creating biological weapons, of which Cyber 6 was one of them, but she rebelled against her creator and was fighting his creations.
Ooh.
And actually found out later on in the series that the Dr. Richter, I think his name was actually a clone of the original Doctor.
Ooh.
And it was kind of dark. Like I remember I read that the comic it was based on was like really dark and depressing, and that the cartoon like tried to like kind of fluff everything up and liven it up because it was like, okay, how do we say he's a Nazi without actually saying he's a Nazi? And so there's actually like no Nazi imagery in the cartoon, but there is like a scene where that Doctor's clone, who is an incompetent 12-year-old kid, actually goose steps across the screen. And it's like one of those things where you're just like, why did he do that? And then he was like, oh wait, But it was surprisingly good. I mean, the animation could have been a lot better, and some of the plot details were repeating themselves. But it was basically a Monster of the Week show, and it would really be cool to see it get like a full run. Because it could have rivaled Batman if they would have just put a little extra effort into it.
That was the Cyber 6, you say?
Yeah.
I've always wanted a parody cartoon called The Urine 8. And it'd be that kind of cartoon with there's 8 people and
we're not going any further.
yeah. Okay,
think
Dave just installing the app, application, software, whatever you want to call it. The one thing I liked about hello, Dave.
Oh, there's a 4th person.
Hello
This
there.
is Dave. He looks like Super Mario. There he is. Finally. Welcome, David. Dave or David? Dave.
Dave.
Right. How are you, Dave?
All right, yourself?
I'm doing quite well. This is Matthew and Zachary.
Hello, Matthew and Zachary.
Hello.
We're just talking about cartoons forgotten cartoons of the ages. Do you have any stories about cartoons that you remember that no one else seemed to?
Well, I mean, yes, I'm sure I do. They may be slow to come through because it is 7:30 on a Sunday morning. This is my breakfast. Say hello to my breakfast.
Hello, Dave's breakfast.
I may not be so quick on the uptake. I think I'm down about 2 hours of sleep, something like that. But these are my most formative memories, so I'm sure they're going to come whizzing through. The first thing that springs to mind, I can tell you about, doesn't quite fully entirely fit the bill, but sort of does.
Uh-huh.
And it was a program called Gophers. And this was on in, oh gosh, it must have been about, I think it was 1990, Sunday morning. And it was, first I'll tell you what it was supposed to be, and then I'll tell you what it was. It was supposed to be a cartoon series about that was like a classic sitcom, but a cartoon for kids. So it was supposed to be a family of brash American redneck gophers moved to England, and they moved next door to the quietest. It was a British program, and they moved next door to the quietest family of English rabbits, and they kind of invade their lives and start to change everything. So basically, it's the dads are the ones who clash. You've got Arthur Rabbit was this quintessential sort of British lisping man like that, and then you got the redneck Chuck Gopher, and that wasn't a very good redneck voice. But their families get on swimmingly. They've got Chuck's got a son and Arthur's got a daughter, and there isn't like a romance, but there would be if they were a bit older. You know, they'd sort of strike up a friendship that's obviously going to be lasting, and then the 2 wives get on perfectly well, but they have this feud. So that's what it was supposed to be. I don't know quite why that didn't go ahead, but somewhere along the line they ended up doing it live action instead. So what it was a cartoon series, and it was presented like a cartoon series, but it was live action. And the way that they did that was like robot heads. So kind of like, imagine low-rent Ninja Turtles, except in quality. They were like, you've seen low-rent Ninja Turtles in like the 2nd and 3rd film, and then there was a dreadful TV series. We know what like bad quality Ninja Turtle robot heads look like. These were good quality. They weren't. They just weren't as technologically advanced as like the first film. But it was puppetry. It was robot heads, as I say, on live actors, with cartoon graphics coming on the screen and cartoon stuff they were interacting with, and it was just completely brilliant. It had one of the funniest puppets I've ever seen in my life, which was the sort of the lizard sidekick to the bad guy, Dr. Wince. Sly was the lizard, and you can look this up on YouTube. There were like last time I checked, there were a few clips of Gophers. It's Gophers with an exclamation mark. Channel 4 Gophers, you might need to put Channel 4 Gophers, and there was like 2 episodes, but they were in Russian or something. They were in a language I don't speak, and I think they were either dubbed over or they just weren't. But you'd see the the puppets anyway, and I don't know if you know this because I haven't started doing it online yet, but I make comics apart from doing internet things. And
yep, I did know that.
You did? Well, Gophers is absolutely my biggest influence when it comes to doing comics, because like everything that I was about, how old was I then? I would have been 8. And I think it just informed how I think stories should be told. So, because what it did was, I've described what the overall story was, well, what the premise was, but there was an overarching story about this crystal this powerful crystal that was buried under their house. That was why the bad guy was the bad guy. He was trying to get them out of there to get this powerful crystal. Meanwhile, this is what I love so much about Gophers. It would just randomly cut away to other stuff that was going on in the area. So sometimes the Gophers would be just doing something, maybe getting on with their lives, and the camera would pan down to a little hole in the skirting board, like a mouse hole, but it was a cockroach hole. And then you would get this scene with these cockroaches. And that bit is probably why they aren't showing it anymore and why they couldn't show it now, because the cockroaches were, of course, Mexican stereotypes. And their story, their story, which is simultaneously a stereotype and quite an interesting idea for a story, it was that they were trying to see the wider world. They were trying to get out of this skirting board, but every time they did, the owners of the house, the Gophers, would step on them because there were cockroaches in the house. But this was all presented like a crossing the border analogy.
Oh.
and they went all the way. Like when they got stepped on, you would then get a close up of this destroyed, crunched thing with a face on the top, and his friends would all like lament his death. So that was that. But then you had these two birds. Hopefully that bit isn't what's influenced me the most. But you had these two birds living in the tree. You had all these other characters that it would just zoom in on, and they would have a little sketch, and then it would go back to the main series, and it was just brilliant. It really was great. So a few years ago, because it hasn't been on TV since 1991, I think was the last time it was on. So I wrote to the production company and I said, look, why can't I watch Gophers anymore? It's like my favorite program. It's not out on DVD. It's never been released on VHS apart from the first couple of episodes. Why? What will we ever see this again? And they said, no, you won't. We're sorry. But what's happened is it was one of these things where it was made by a number of different companies. Those different companies split up, and some of them disbanded. So there is literally no one out there now who can sign off on the copyright. So we'll never see it again. Pardon me, we'll never see it again. So what this means is that my VHS copy may be the only copy in the world, and I am not touching that tape until I have a VHS to digital backup system set up and ready, which I don't yet have.
Yeah. You might be sitting on your own little crystal that a super bad villain with a lizard sidekick may come looking for your Mexican cockroaches one day.
I'm that guy. If it turns out that the original cans of Gophers are buried under someone's house, there's a comic in that. I might do that.
There goes the rest of your Sunday.
Sorry?
There goes the rest of your Sunday.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So anyway, good
I
morning.
kind of feel. I feel, Ian, that you and I being Australian and our media companies being pretty crap with their content delivery, we're being a bit shortchanged because most of our list either comes from the grand old USA or, in your and I particular case, we watched Japanese cartoons that were dubbed over. But I cannot think of a quintessential Australian children's cartoon off the top of my head. We had a lot of BBC stuff when we were young in the 80s and 90s, but there's nothing in our local canon that, is quintessentially Australian.
That's really interesting. I was wondering about that. Coming here, I was like, I couldn't think of any Australian cartoons, and I was, except the one with the girl and the kangaroo. Was that yours? It must have been.
Oh, Dot and the Kangaroo.
Yeah.
Ah, wow. Yeah, okay. See, that one didn't come straight to the forefront of my mind.
Well, it wasn't great.
As a child, I think I saw the whole series. Dot and the whale, Dot and the kangaroo, Dot and the whatever, Dot and the this, Dot and the that. That was unique in that it was
Did you
live
have a
action
kangaroo? What?
backgrounds. All the backgrounds were real.
I don't remember it well
Speaking
enough.
of, that was a big theme, and I remember that the now utterly disgraced Rolf Harris did a couple of movies where he explored our convict roots, but there was like a little animated koala that would follow him around and stuff like that. And I think even the soldiers were, the British soldiers were animated, but it was again set against, instead of a matte painting, it was real footage of the Australian outback and all that kind of thing. So there you go. We may not have had a particular series that popped out, but it seems as though we had a style.
True. There was also a New Zealand one. It was puppets again, not a cartoon called Space Knights, and that was from New Zealand. That's probably New Zealand's best export. But I've since found out on YouTube that the show got cancelled because the creator and the production company had different... They wanted the show to go in two different ways. So because of disagreements, the show got cancelled. And I think in a case like that, you go with the creator's idea because it's the creator's content. The production company wouldn't have anything to produce if the creator hadn't made it in the first place. And also, another good theme song. Is that birds twittering at your place, David? I hear birds.
Oh, it could be. Yeah, there are birds outside. I got the windows open.
Right.
Am I? In fact, just let me check. You getting any feedback off me? Can you hear yourselves? Anything like that?
Yeah. No, it sounds fine. You are slightly out of sync. That's it. And you're slightly out of sync, but...
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've just found the Gophers. It looks similar to the US series Dinosaurs.
Yes, it is.
Oh,
It came out at about the same time. Gophers certainly... Gophers was on here before Dinosaurs, I think, but presumably they were made at about the same time.
I grew up watching Dinosaurs, and I do remember I actually stumbled across it on YouTube. Somebody who was on the production team posted something, or it got circled around, but it basically one of the puppets malfunctioned during a filming, and it was basically the baby, and its body popped up and started spinning around like a top. And it's surreal. And yeah.
Did someone put Exorcist music over the top?
No, it was basically you could hear people laughing. They were you could hear the production crew just laughing because apparently this had happened once before. But I do remember watching that show as a kid, and it got moved around a lot towards the end of its series run.
You mean the time slot?
Yeah, they kept changing it to I think it was afternoons for a while, then it went to weekends, and then it got some really bizarre cable slot. And for a while, I got curious because we had found it on DVD. Disney was doing its mass, we're going to release everything we ever did on DVD, and Dinosaurs was one of those. Well, I looked up because my parents asked me because they they watched it with us, and they thought it was funny. Because it was sort of there actually was a joke The Simpsons did, because it was so similar to The Simpsons that the creators of The Simpsons considered suing for plagiarism until they realized, wait, we'll be suing Buena Vista, which is a subsidiary of the Almighty Mouse. Let's just back off for a little bit. But I looked it up, and it was interesting because on Wikipedia they had all the listings of the episode, episode list, and then it said the finale.
Yeah.
And I was just why did the finale get its own special article? And I looked it up, and Dinosaurs is the single most depressing ending to a series I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
What happened? I must know.
Well, you know what happens. You know what happens because it's about dinosaurs.
Yes. It's but it's the way. Oh no. It's darker than that. I looked it up. I looked it up, and it basically said there was this very special beetle that ate this one particular plant that grew in the forest. Well, they had killed off the beetle, except for one beetle, and the family took in the beetle because it happened to be in the work site where the father worked, and he's like, well, they took him in, and he said, you hunted my species to extinction, and now this weed is going to overtake all of your vegetation. So they're kind of like, okay, we really messed up here, so let's develop a herbicide to kill off the weed. They wipe out the forest. Because they wipe out all the vegetation, and then they're just like, okay, we screwed up again. How are we going to fix this? They drop high-powered explosives in the volcanoes around the world to cause a mass chain reaction of eruptions to basically induce rainstorms. It backfires, and it cuts to the family sitting in the living room watching their stone TV as the newscaster says, for the first time in our history, it is snowing. And basically, they say, we estimate that in 10 million years, the ice will stop. And it ends with basically the family says, we'll make it through this, guys. They actually say, the family says, they all huddle around and just like the father says, everything will be okay. I mean, we survived worse. I mean, remember that, like, we've survived, like, war, we survived all this. We'll be fine. It cuts to the news broadcaster and he just says, well, as I said before, ladies and gentlemen, good night. And good luck. And that's it. And it cuts to the picture. It cuts outside the window as you just see snow falling, and that's how the series ends. And I'm just like, I'm watching this, I'm just like, wow, if I watched this when I was actually watching the show, I probably would have just broke down.
But can I just say, at least it had an ending. Some series that are really good, they're short-lived, and they just get cut off.
Yeah.
When that's another thing I'm going to say about Mysterious Cities of Gold. The one thing I liked about that cartoon is that it wasn't an ongoing cartoon that just went on and on and on and on and on. It actually had a story, a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it actually concluded. I don't know if you're familiar with that cartoon, Dave. Mysterious Cities of Gold.
Yes, I am. It was on here, and it was one of the main things that we all watched. However, it was so long ago that I now basically can't remember it. So I'm actually wondering, because there's new ones of it coming out now, isn't there? Now you say that it concluded, but I thought they didn't. I thought it didn't. I thought they didn't get there or something. I can't remember. What happened at the end?
Aliens, believe it or not.
Oh, interesting. Well, yeah, they're doing new seasons of it now, aren't they? Just carrying on as if it's not a reboot. They're just doing season 2 now.
Oh, I never knew that.
Yeah, they are. Check it out. There's a trailer. It looks quite nice. It's a sort of CG hybrid looking thing, but in a tasteful way.
That's amazing.
The alien thing really threw me, as it just threw Maddie just then.
I think it's the same people making it. I think it really is just like, well, no, it won't be the same individuals, but it's, the same companies in the same countries are kind of going, no, do you know what? Series 2, here it comes, 2014. In fact, it might have been on. It might have been 2012 for all I know.
Here it is. Mysterious Cities of Gold trailer 2012.
Fantastic.
I love it when I find out things like this. There's Mysterious Cities Dior.
Dior.
But of course, it rather sort of throws a spanner in the works when it comes to the series' original ending. Because I guess that now isn't the ending, so the beginning, middle, and end thing is a little bit screwed with now. But might be good. Don't know.
Yeah. I'll definitely check this out. Oh, okay, it's the same 3 kids, Sebastian and and the girl and the guy Tao. But that's something I like. I like cartoons that end. For example, a cartoon I know you're familiar with, Dave. Ulysses 31.
Ah, yeah.
An homage to Christmas homage.
Yeah.
I have that on DVD. The series actually ends.
Yeah. I have it as well, and I haven't yet seen the ending because there's something just sufficiently slow burning about the series that I've never really made it all the way through. It's one of those ones that I have because I must have it, because it was on when I was a child, and I am a man-child, and therefore I must have all the cartoons on DVD. But I haven't watched it all the way through, so that's still ahead of me. I still have that to look forward to.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, having to own it. Like, this is from my childhood, I will own it.
Yeah.
I may die never having watched it, but I will own it. Oh, sorry, you were talking, Matty.
Because I have this thing where if there was something that mattered to me,
yes,
whether or not it matters to me now, if it's available to have, then I should have it. Because one day I'll go, oh, remember that, I want it, and then it might be gone by then.
Yeah, I think Matty was going to say something.
Segue into probably the most talked about 80s cartoon of all time, which is, the irreplaceable and seemingly indestructible Transformers series. I had the drive 10 years ago, whenever they first released the DVD box set, to go and relive all those wonderful Generation 1 memories. Finished high school, finished college, got some money. Okay, let's sit down and let's relive this. And, oh my God, they were bad. That was so bad. I mean, honestly.
No, carry on, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, it's times like this when I kind of, I don't feel so bad about going and watching the Michael Bay versions, because bloody hell, these original cartoons were bad.
I went through a similar, but not quite exactly the same situation with Transformers, which was that I had basically never seen it. I was born in 1982, so it was there, but I think, I get the feeling that the Transformers thing was maybe just passing by as I got to school. So, like, my first big craze was Ghostbusters, and I never quite got Transformers. But I had a couple of Transformers, and I had glasses with Transformers little things on them and stuff, and so I was kind of into it. But I never saw it, to the extent that when my friend played me the theme tune on a story tape he had, I thought it was amazing, and I thought that it was like he just had this tape with an expanded version of the tune from the adverts. So when I was at university, I was about 19 when it first came out on DVD, the first series anyway, first season, and I just snapped it up because I was in that, DVDs were still new-ish, cartoons were coming out, He-Man came out, bought that, all of this, and yeah, it's boring, isn't it?
It's horrible. It's racist and it's illogical, and there's no narrative to follow, and it's terrible.
But I have a part of it is my fault, because I am, and I'm. You mentioned the word racist there, and I have to confess that I am a robot racist, and I can't really tell them apart. So I have some work ahead of me now. My girlfriend Abby is helping me out with that. She has massively got into the current comics that are out, and she's introduced me to those, and they're great. More than meets the eye. Fantastic series, and like that I think is going to make me. It's going to sort of give me surrogate nostalgia, and I'll be able to watch the cartoon and enjoy it a lot more after that.
What you have to understand, though, is that original cartoon was nothing more than a 30-minute advertisement with a story.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah,
and that's true of a lot of things. That's true of a lot of things from the 80s, and it's often held up. I've said this elsewhere. I think it's often held up as one of the reasons why 80s cartoons are kind of bad and cynical, because you have Transformers, you have He-Man, you have even Ninja Turtles. That cartoon was literally only made to sell toy, or rather to justify the creation of the toys, and obviously the comics existed. They wanted to make toys of the comics. The toy manufacturer wouldn't do it without a cartoon, so they threw out a cartoon. Now, I don't actually hold that against 80s cartoons, because I have these such wonderful memories of that time, because in those days, if something was in a cartoon, you could pretty much go and get a toy of it. And I don't think of that as a bad thing. I realize it was advertising and that's cynical, and pester power is a bad thing and so on. But from the perspective of someone who didn't do a lot of pestering and basically didn't get a lot of these toys, they were just cartoons with a collectible sensibility which can be engaging, whether you get the toys or not, I think.
It's interesting that I don't think that particular culture's gone away. I think it's become a lot more subtle. As Ian and I were at the Australian version of Comic Con called Supernova a few weeks ago, one of the comments I made was that there was a lot of, rather than a lot of cosplay, there was a lot of cosplay accessorizing. So you had your new Cartoon Network shows, Adventure Time being the standout, and rather than having Finns and Jakes in costume, you had people with, a Finn hoodie or a Jake backpack, and
of course the Pikachu hoodies as well.
Exactly, yeah, it's all the same thing. Yeah, and so whereas I think our hindsight of the 80s is very much, the brutal marketing with the women in the, big shoulder pads and the men with the really nice suits walking around, have a toy. And nowadays I think it's a heck of a lot more subtle. It's like, here's a really, really funny, witty cartoon. It's really irrelevant, and you can watch it from the age of 5 until a stone 25-year-old. And just by the way, over there, there's some hats and a couple of backpacks, and all those trading cards, and look at all.
And part of that formula is the fact, as you just mentioned, that the cartoons are really good now.
They are, much better. I mean, they actually have some character development, some arc and narrative,
and you described it as you can watch it when you're 5 to 25, but that's another way of saying it's just really good, because the cartoons from the 80s, you've got to be 5 to 10.
Yeah,
so true. Just going back to him, Dave. No, Zach, you were going to say something?
No, I actually on Transformers, I grew up in the 90s. I was born in 90. So really? My introduction to Transformers was Beast Wars.
Oh gosh, that's probably my favorite one, other than the new one.
I've heard it's very good. I've heard it's very good, but I haven't seen it yet. It's on Netflix though, so I will.
I mean, I was like 6, so I had some idea what was going on. I understood that the Tyrannosaurus Dragon Megatron was evil, and that the Gorilla Optimus Primal was good, and that's all I needed to understand. But I had a couple of little cousins who they grew up with the Bay films and the new Transformers series that were the new CGI series that were coming out.
Oh, that's good. That's good, Prime.
And
Prime's brilliant.
Good.
And I remember because at the time they were discovering that, I was discovering the old 80s cartoons, and more specifically a full review of the Transformers the Motion Picture. And I remember watching that, and all I could think of when I first heard the part where Optimus Prime dies and he stays dead, all I could think was I can't wait for my cousins to get old enough to actually say, hey guys, let's watch this. Just because, and just say look, this is back when your dad was a kid. This is what he watched. But that whole, it was just that was my experience with Transformers, was that I grew up watching the Next Generation, and then there was the gap. And so to fill that gap, I was born into the Pokemon boom. So everything went from being when I was a kid, went from being oh, Batman's so cool, to all of a sudden Pikachu was everywhere.
Man, I've never seen anything that everywhere except for Pokemon.
And Transformers fell to the wayside, and then actually, if you talk to the right people over here, you'll have a lot of people that I do remember a news broadcast when I was 7 that essentially says, "Is Pokemon evil?" And it was a full-on argument about how badges were talismans to be collected, and that these creatures with powers were satanic, and all I could think was, And all I could think was, but he's a little mouse that fits in your pocket.
I have a much more real-life horror story that goes back to... no, it's not a horror story, but I thought it was horrific. I used to volunteer for a card company, TCG company called Decipher. They had Star Wars, Star Trek, the other one, Lord of the Rings, and an anime series that they had trading card games for. This is going back nearly 10 years now. And we had our booth set up at our little, Supernova, the little convention, and trying to get people to play the games and this kind of thing. And we're on a lunch break and we were wandering up to the main hall, and we knew there was a big Pokemon tournament up there. I mean, we were struggling to get anyone to sit down and here's $150 worth of free cards, and they're like, no, thanks, some Yu-Gi-Oh's over there and Pokemon's over there, and I'm right. So I walk into this, what was supposed to be the food hall, but had been commandeered by the event organisers of the Pokemon Championships of Australia, and it was just row upon row upon row in this quasi Confucian-style exam setting with all of these, everyone's and I'll never forget seeing this 40-year-old man who looked like he'd just, come from Oscar the Grouch's trash can, leap up in ecstatic excitement that he just, with plenty of profanity, proclaimed how he had just, dishonoured this opponent's mother in all kinds of exotic locations and all this kind of thing. This kid was probably a day over 12. I'm just I said, God, this is what Pokemon does to people. This is why we're all going to hell.
Yeah. Well, there is something that's been changed about us by the cartoons from the 80s and 90s, because that guy you just described, we've now, have we not, all met a version of him somewhere along the line. Yep. And that number is stacking up. There are more of them around. And in our darkest moments, we go, well, did I just act like one of those guys? You start to check your own behavior. And you think back to our parents. They didn't care about Scooby-Doo the way we care about Transformers and things like that. You know what I mean? The cartoons that were from a couple of decades before, when they would have been young, didn't last in their minds in the same way. And that must have been... I mean, presumably that was to do with all of those toys. The fact that a cartoon was not just on for half an hour a week, it was part of the world. Must be to do with that, mustn't it?
I mean, it built schoolyard friendships, it tore them apart, it was a factor in everything we did. There was music associated with it. There was, social groups outside of school, meetups. I mean, these things took on a whole life of their own with our generation, I think.
I was one of two founding presidents of the Turtle Power fan club at our school, and this involved, if you joined, it was a top quality club. Let me tell you. First off, we had a scrapbook that you were allowed to look through, in which we had drawn Ninja Turtles. That was good. We had a service. This was very popular. There was a colouring book at the time that everyone had for some reason. Just everyone had this Turtles colouring book, and in it there was a drawing of Raphael that was exactly the right size. That if you joined the club and gave us your colouring book, we would colour it in really well, and we would cut it out really carefully. And then we would, I don't know how we got this, but we managed to get hold of some elastic. So we would hole punch holes in it, and long story short, we made masks for everyone of the turtle they wanted. And they were exactly the right size for our faces at the time. So that was another service you got with the Turtle Power fan club, and that was it. Oh well, it's all done now. It's gone. If you can get hold of that coloring book, though, I'll do you a mask. I've remembered, by the way. I've remembered. Sorry, Ian, what were you saying?
Just hold that thought. I was just going back to the social thing and the man-child. Maybe the product of parents that tried to suppress that part of their child's like, no, you can't have your Transformer toys and whatever, but he really
Could
wanted
be.
them. So when he
Could
gets out
be.
into the world on his own, he can have those things. He's not so. That's all I wanted to say.
And I think that no, that's a very good point. That's very possible. Because I think we've got okay. Let's accept that then. Let's take that as true because in that case, that fits in with another idea that I had when I was a teenager, which was that because I was 15, maybe I was 15 by the time I first heard the word anime, because it wasn't a thing until then, really. I mean, of course, it existed in Japan, but it hadn't come across here the way it has now. And that started to happen when I was 15. I was sort of first on the internet, and teenagers were first discussing it. And so I've got a bit of an outsider perspective on anime. It's something that was introduced to my life later on, and it's always sort of felt to me as if not the reason why it exists, but the reason why it took off the way it did was because we were just coming out of that time when cartoons were a huge influence on us, but not very good. You know, Ninja Turtles, the old Transformers, huge influences, really mattered to us, but not actually very good. And we'd yet got to the point where cartoons started to be really good, which we're in now. But we were going the teenagers of the world, because it was driven by the 15-year-olds of the time. They're like they're the G1 of anime fans who like the current anime thing is from. And it occurred to me that what was happening there was that we were starting among ourselves to no parental pressure, but from peer pressure. We were starting to go, okay, we're too old for cartoons now. We're not allowed to like cartoons. But we're on that threshold where, you know, last year you were a child and it was fine. This year you're meant to be all broody and sullen and grown up, and it's not fine anymore. So we do still like cartoons. We're just not socially supposed to. And then suddenly, wait, here's this other kind of cartoon that only I know about and the other kids at school don't. I can pass that off as like better and a step up, and that is what we did. And we all started, and this is why, I mean, it's still going on now, but particularly then there was this whole, oh, it's way more mature, you know, oh, it's way, and we mistook like the same level of childish tropes that we had in our cartoons, they had in theirs, but because we hadn't seen their tropes before, we mistook it for a whole new language, a whole new world, and therefore presumably grown up. And of course, the fact that some of them had blood and sex in helped that image, and then anime happened. So I think the modern nerd is maybe built out of those two factors. The sort of like peer pressure. It's not so cool to be into cartoons anymore, but I still am. And on the other hand, yeah, maybe parents going, oh, you shouldn't, you know, base your life around these toys, but I still want to. And then of course those are the guys like you were talking about, you know, the 40-year-old guy, the gross ones. But the rest of us, you know, may have taken some of that on in a more, you know, in a more sort of acceptable way, and sort of run with it. And so we now have this great amount of love for these old things and anime current going through everything. I feel like that might be where some of it came from. That sounds overly negative, but I don't mean it that way. In the same way that I didn't find the cynical marketing thing to be necessarily a bad thing. I think you can have something like that could turn out bad and then use it for good.
Yeah, and you were going to say something before we went off on that. You were going to say something else about going back to your Turtle Club and your masks.
Actually, no. I'd remembered a completely different thing. I had remembered another cartoon that may be Australian or may not. It might be. I mean, I am, as I said before, a terrible robot racist, and as a child, I confess, I would not have known the difference between Australia and New Zealand. I hope you could forgive me for that. And so maybe this was from New Zealand, I don't know. But it had bunyips in it, and the Phantom Treehouse.
Oh, that rings a bell.
Are you guys familiar with the Phantom Treehouse?
It rings a bell.
It was. It was so here's how I knew it. It was one of those things that when you... I don't know if you all relate to this, but I was very into VHS when I was a kid, and this was because, you know, I was just on the cusp when it wasn't new, but it, you know, not everyone had a video yet. And so when we got ours, I was tremendously excited, and I used to just video stuff, just random things off the TV. And so you would end up with all of these videos that you kind of didn't care about the actual content, but you deeply, deeply cared about watching the video because it was a video you had. And one of these had on it this Phantom Treehouse cartoon. And it was so long. It was just this long, long, long film. And it was... My memory of it, which was... This mainly comes from when I found the video again, aged about 17, and tried to watch it, was that it was entirely tedious. It was extremely long, boring film. I'd be happy to be proved wrong about this by seeing it again, but I haven't been able to find it. I don't think it's on YouTube. It was about... Gosh, what was it even about? There was a child, there was a bunyip, who in this case was a green, kind of Grinchy-looking character.
It is on YouTube right here.
It is?
1 hour, 13 minutes, 48 seconds.
Oh my lord!
That is not as long as it felt. I remember that when I watched it as a teenager, and of course I would have been very cynical then, so perhaps I didn't give it its fair due. I remember thinking that it looked like it had been animated, you know, in felt pen, on a sort of a, you know, beside the phone notepad, and it had a pirate in it who sings awful songs. So it might be brilliant, but I, as a cynical teenager, thought it was just dreadful. But I'm used to watch it quite a lot.
It looks positively dreadful.
Yeah, that's as I recall. Let me try. So it's just Phantom Treehouse, right? I got the name right, did I?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah, that's it.
Horrible. Oh
Yep,
lord.
that's the one.
Maybe we can tell people this is from New Zealand.
It is from New Zealand, is it?
No, I don't want to lay claim to this.
Believe it or not, it has a Wikipedia article. It's about 3 paragraphs long.
And the top hit on YouTube might even be the exact time I taped it off the TV. It's got the right sort of BBC logos before it. Oh wow! Yeah, it's not very high quality, is it? It's not as bad as I remember, but then I haven't got the sound on. Oh gosh, no, it is, isn't it? There's the pirate. Oh, he's not. Is he a pirate? Yeah, he's a pirate, but he's kind of dressed like a Scottish captain. Oh gosh.
Why not?
Okay, yeah, I just turned the sound on for the pirate song. Yeah, it's not very good, is it, Phantom Treehouse? So, is it Australian? Is that your fault?
It's definitely our fault.
Yeah, the Wikipedia article confirms it's an Australian production from 1982.
I'm so sorry, you guys.
Yeah.
It's about this time when we normally we normally pass the blame to New Zealand.
Sure.
Yeah. We'll take Russell Crowe. They can have the Phantom Treehouse.
Yeah. Well, actually, I actually, because I was born in the 90s, I grew up in the VHS boom. Back when everybody, if you had a Betamax, people frowned upon you because how could you have a Betamax? And because I grew up, because I was a little kid, and I was the youngest of this huge family of cousins, my parents had these VHS tapes that they had gotten because they had figured out, like, oh, I like this, my sister likes this, so they got these VHSs that catered to our childish interests. And I loved trains.
Okay.
I thought they were cool, and they had these 2 VHS tapes that has like one was about this train it was I found it. It was the little engine that could.
Yeah.
Classic.
And there was another one that was like called like the Great Harbor Rescue or something, and it was about this train trying to get to the harbor because they need to put a giant rock in the harbor, otherwise the storm would cause these tidal waves that would wipe out all the sentient houses in the harbor. And I remember watching this as a kid, and I'm just like, as a kid, thought it was awesome. And then there was one that I had forgotten about until I was on YouTube about a year ago.
Yeah.
And it was about these this raccoon and this bear, or this fox.
The Christmas tree train.
Yes!
The Christmas tree train.
Yes! I had forgotten it existed. Yes.
Zach, not only am I aware of the Christmas tree train, but I have used the theme tune in my big Christmas medley song that I did a few years ago on YouTube. I sneaked it in. I sneaked it in because do you know that I did this big Christmas song?
I did. I did.
Videos, and I'd seen that, but I actually watched your Dune video because I'm a huge fan of Dune. So. Oh,
right. Well, I did. I did this big medley of Christmas songs, and the whole point of it was to fit in as many little references to just not even just Christmas stuff, just stuff that I could think of. And one of them, because the song is so similar to what is it? To Frosty the Snowman. It's very, very, very similar. So what I did was I just sneaked it in on the end. So I've got Frosty the Snowman, which is like do 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 do, but I just ended it as do 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 do, which is the Christmas tree train. I can't remember the words to the Christmas tree train, and I can't remember very much about it. But for the benefit of anyone who isn't us two, it was, as you say, it was these two small children animals. Their families were hibernating or something, and they end up lost on this adventure. And they end up accidentally hitchhiking on this Christmas tree train. And it culminates in the window of a department store, which is like a winter wonderland, right?
Oh god! Yes, it was. They thought it was their forest because it looked so similar, and it turned out it was like Macy's window.
Yeah.
And I'm just like and I remember, and I hadn't seen it in years. And I clicked on the video out of like nostalgic curiosity, watched about 5 minutes of it, and just went, "Oh my god, I watched this as a kid."
Yeah. The Christmas tree train is coming, bring trees for all the kids. And did you know? Did you know that was like made in? As I say, I videoed that off the TV in the same sort of era as like the Phantom Treehouse. It was on TV then, so it must have been a 1980 cartoon or something.
Yeah.
Did you know that in 1990, about 8 or 9, they made a TV series of it finally? It was terrible, but they did.
Yes. I remember I saw one episode when I was when I was like 5, and I was just kind of like, what's this thing? Because I knew about the Christmas tree train, but this TV series, I was confused because it was like. But
the Christmas tree train here it says 1993.
It was not 1993.
Yeah.
Oh,
it might have been released.
How could it possibly be different from what I remember?
No, but it wasn't. Like, I literally had it on video in the 80s.
I think it was released here. I think it was released in the U.S. in '93. Because that was actually like there was a huge barrage. I remember because we went through our VHSs one day to just kind of like figure out exactly what we had, what we were going to get, like give to the Goodwill, give to charity, and all that. And most of these really weird VHSs we had were from about '93 to like just before the cutoff of the decade. And I remember that there's this like barrage of all these really obscure cartoons that just were like put on VHS to be like mass marketed or something.
Oh, it was 1983. Did you say 1983? I thought you said 93.
I did say 93.
Oh, well, no, it was 1983, so maybe they just
Right.
missed the number when they were typing that in or something.
Yeah, good wiki.
Possibly.
If you look up, Ian, if you look up Chucklewood Critters on Wikipedia, that's the overall thing, and that's where I'm getting 1983 from. Sorry, carry on.
Okay,
No.
speaking of
No.
animated Christmas specials, sorry, Zach. Does anyone remember the Rankin Bass stop animated? I think it was Rankin Bass.
Mm-hmm.
Stop animated
So
Christmas specials.
fun fact. I don't
Yeah.
know if this is the case. Here in the States, every December, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is aired on CBS.
Mm-hmm.
And it's never any of the different Rudolphs. It is always the original stop-motion Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Yeah.
Like clockwork. They will actually run advertisements like, I think this last year it was like, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, now in digital HD.
No.
And it was like,
Yeah.
I've never seen it, you know? I've never seen any of them. They just...
you are a lucky man.
I just didn't see them. Yeah, but I'm not, because I'm... You know what I mean? Like, I love, like, crap Christmas things.
Oh,
I would quite
yeah,
like
fair
to see
enough.
them, so I might... I nearly tracked it down a couple of years ago. I nearly watched it, but I think I might even have like downloaded it or something, but I didn't watch it. I guess, hey, now it's been HDized. Maybe I'll see the Blu-ray or something like that.
There's actually a huge like Rankin Bass did like Frosty the Snowman, and they did that.
Mm-hmm.
They did a couple of other animated ones, but we have a bunch of them because my mother loves Christmas, and so they would put out these things, and of course we were kids when all these things were being put out on VHS. So let me see if I can count them all. Rudolph's Christmas in July, which is the most surreal of the bunch.
I don't like the sound of that.
I'll get to it in a minute. There's the original Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, it's basically an adaptation of a marketing campaign.
Yeah.
Like, Rudolph was actually created by a department store to be a sort of Christmas mascot, and then somebody was commissioned to write a poem, and we have Rankin Bass. And then Frosty, Santa Claus is coming to town, which is another really weird one about how Santa Claus was actually from a town where Santa Claus was orphaned, and he was raised in a town where there were no kids because the overlord of the town, who was this really, really bad German stereotype, like hated children and banished them. Which was later used in their Easter Bunny is Coming to Town video, which was really weird. And then
I've got that right here. I just YouTubed Rankin Bass, the Easter Bunny Coming to Town is as old as I am, 1977.
Yeah, they did all these different ones. Let's see, The Year Without a Santa Claus, which actually introduces the Meister brother, the Miser brothers, which was like Jack Frost, like basically Mother Nature had two sons. One controlled heat, the other controlled cold, and they were always fighting with each other about
I like that.
where like the temperatures were, where it was going to be warm and cold. And I think it was they had to strike a bargain with him in order to make the South cold. And that's how they would allow something to happen for Christmas, and it was just like, it made no sense. But Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is sort of ubiquitous with Christmas. At least it's what I grew up with Rudolph. Everyone was like, "Oh, Rudolph is like." Yeah,
I mean, we didn't have here in the UK. I don't think they really showed the actual Rankin Bass Rudolph very often, if they showed it at all. I never saw it, but obviously the song is a main thing about Christmas.
Yeah, here the Rankin Bass movie is like I said, they air it every year. But they did it. It felt like Rudolph's Christmas in July, which tried to combine Frosty the Snowman, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Christmas, and the 4th of July.
Oh, dear.
And it was really, really creepy because Frosty actually dies.
Oh.
Ooh, I like it already.
They did this whole thing like Rudolph got his base. They basically rewrite the entire Rudolph story that the snowstorm was actually caused by this evil snow wizard and his ice dragons. And I can't believe I remember all this crap, but he did. I think that was the snowstorm. Rudolph stopped that, and Rudolph's something magic was more powerful than his. So that's why he was able to fly through the storm. And then they basically decide to Rudolph's flying somewhere, and they end up in like a huge 4th of July celebration. And everyone talks about how great it would be to have Santa Claus show up and they'd be like Christmas in July, and it'll save the circus or whatever. And how Frosty has these magic amulets that keep him frozen in the July heat. This is a plot point in the most weird, bizarre way.
That sounds like the biggest stretch of bullshit I've ever.
It is. It is literally. They basically say if Rudolph uses his nose for anything evil, the medallions will melt, and Frosty and his family. Frosty has kids in this. Frosty
if he uses his nose for anything evil, that's my favorite sentence to me.
And so this other reindeer who hates Rudolph because Rudolph outperformed him in the reindeer games and was chosen as Santa's lead reindeer gets him to steal the money to give to a shrewd business, to give to a loaner, to give to this banker who the circus owes money to, so they'll go out of business. He can buy the circus, make a fortune off of it. And then they cut to this part where they go, "Oh no, the medallions melted. You used their nose for evil." And it cuts to 4 puddles. And you just see a top hat, a scarf, and 2 little tiny mittens where the kids were. And it's just like... and it's... Of course,
No, go on there.
Santa shows up, the day is saved. But at the same time, I'm just watching this, and I'm like, even as a kid, I'm just like watching it. But then when I got older, and of course the internet, and I'm reading these things about, this is something I used to watch. I'm just like, wow, this is just wow.
Did you have in both like America and Australia? Did you have the Snowman? The film, the cartoon.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Because that's our equivalent to Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. That was made by Channel 4 back in the days when that was, there were 4 channels and the 4th one was Channel 4.
Stop motion,
No, it's pencil
like
animated.
Hand drawn kind of a thing.
I actually, when I was 8, when I was in the 4th grade, we had an art teacher who, it was around Christmas time, and we were all excited for Christmas break, and she goes, "Okay, to celebrate Christmas, I'm going to show you something that isn't Frosty, and that's actually good." And we spent the class watching The Snowman, and I just remember...
Yeah.
And I just remember, I thought it was one of the most beautiful, like, to this day, and even as a kid, I thought it was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen.
It is. It's a work of art. The Snowman was, they made it the year I was born. They showed it on Christmas Eve, and I think if there was ever a Christmas Eve when they didn't show it, then we would just burn the country down. Like, there'd be riots. It's on every Christmas Eve, exactly as you said, like the Rudolph, and it deserves to be. It's a half hour. Yes. I mean, I guess when you said was it stop motion, that suggests that you might not be too familiar with it. So for anyone else who isn't listening, I'll just describe it briefly. It's Raymond Briggs was a brilliant. I say was, he's still alive, is a brilliant sort of comic artist, but he was most prolific in like the 70s and 80s, and he would make, I say comic artist, he never worked in what you would call comics, he made books, but they were comics. And one of the ones was The Snowman, and this was adapted into a film. And what's so good about the film is that it's silent except for its musical soundtrack, and its musical soundtrack is just one of the greatest albums for children ever produced. It's absolutely brilliant. It's an orchestral score, one single piece all the way through. It has a song in the middle, which is which is famous. That's called "Walking in the Air," and that was a single, and that did well on its own as a record. But it's not even, it's not. I don't even know if it's the highlight of the soundtrack. It's just such a good half hour of music, and this is. Sorry.
Go. Finish your train of thought.
It was very good, and it was about a boy who builds a snowman, and the snowman comes alive, and then they go on adventures and they fly, and it's just really good.
I was just going to say, if you just go to YouTube, type in "The Snowman," it's the very first thing that comes up.
It is, and if you want to watch it, anyone at home, there are actually different versions, so let me guide you through them so you can select the best one. The original, by the way, you should always watch it in 4:3. It has been cropped to widescreen for HD. That is a terrible desecration, and it literally cuts off characters' faces and stuff sometimes. You should never watch that version. Unfortunately, that's the only version commercially released that I'm aware of on DVD or Blu-ray. So, oh dear. I think actually there was a compilation that went with their Father Christmas as well that had the 4:3 version on. So you might find that. But it actually has different. It begins differently depending on what year's version you're watching. The original, which most people hold up as the greatest, but I don't, is it starts with Raymond Briggs, as I say, the man who drew the original book and wrote it, walking sort of through a field, reminiscing on his past, and the implication is that he is the boy who in the film builds the snowman and goes on the adventure. So he kind of walks along going, I remember that Christmas, I remember that winter, it was very snowy and stuff like this. And it then kind of fades into the animation, so that is the definitive, that's the real version. But then, in 1982, I believe, no, that was when the film was made, it must have been in 1983, something like that, it was brought out for America's audience. And I don't know whose idea this was, but someone somewhere went, wait a minute, what if instead of growing up into a random old man that viewers don't recognize, what if the boy grew up to be David Bowie? And so what they did is they built a set of like an attic, and they had David Bowie dress in kind of, I don't know, sort of sensible clothes and walk through this attic going, yes, I still remember that Christmas like it was yesterday. And he gets a scarf out of a drawer, which in the snowman, Father Christmas gives to the boy. And it ends on the enigmatic line, because you see, he was a real snowman. Which doesn't mean anything. What he means is he came alive and was a sentient being.
I've actually heard that line used in anecdotes and things like that, and I was never quite sure of its origin. So there you go. It's David Bowie tripping out over sentient snowmen. I love it.
Have you really?
That's great.
And then a few years ago, like recently, they released it on DVD as a special edition. And for that, and they thought they were doing the world a favor by doing this, they animated a new intro to it, in which Father Christmas, played by Mel Smith, who another thing Raymond Briggs did was he did a couple of books about Father Christmas, in which he was a kind of like grumpy blue collar Father Christmas going about his yearly job and grumbling about it. They turned this into a cartoon, which kind of they'll sell you along with the snowman, but it wasn't anything like as good. And they used that character to do an intro to the snowman. And oh, bless them, they put so much effort into it, and I just don't want it. I don't want it to be done there. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's just not. First off, it's not Bowie, and second off, it's not the original version. It's just something stuck onto the beginning. But then, about 2 Christmases ago, they finally did a sequel. They did The Snowman and the Snow Dog, and I'm happy to say that it's actually good. It does, in fact, live up to the Snow. It's not the masterpiece that The Snowman was, but it goes with it comfortably. It's animated with pencils again, same way. It's oh yeah, and the really great thing about The Snowman that's really, really worth watching it for is that in the intro and in the Walking in the Air segment in the middle, you get these flying shots. The characters are literally flying in the middle because snowmen can fly in this. But in the beginning, it's just a kind of just a helicopter shot, as it were, of like moving in on the house where the boy lives. And in both of those scenes, modern viewers are certain that they must have used CG or something because of how difficult it must have been. But they didn't. They're just brilliant. They managed to, frame by frame, animate these scenes of like panning over countryside by hand with pencils without any... I mean, they might have had some reference. Maybe they had a real helicopter shot that they copied or something, but I doubt it, frankly. They were just very, very good. So there you are. It's well worth having a look at. And then if your children like it, then pop over to the UK at Christmas and watch the stage version, which has been running since... They'll tell you it's been running since around about the 90s, but I went to see it in 1986 in its sort of early proto form, and it's essentially an extended version of the film, but kind of ballet. You know, it's still silent, but it's done through dance and stuff, and it's great. And you can watch. Not so good to watch on TV, but you can. There are two separate filmed versions of this stage show. One from 1998-ish, and then one from a couple of years ago that you can get on DVD. And as I say, they don't really hold up to watch on TV, but if you're there and you've got a child, it's nice. But yeah, film's brilliant.
That's fantastic.
It is.
It's a real institution here.
Actually, speaking of Raymond Briggs, because I had actually re-stumbled across the Snowman, and I got curious. And like most things, when I really like something, I get curious about the creator and see what else they've done. I looked up Raymond Briggs, and I found on YouTube one of the other adaptations of his work.
Oh.
When the Wind Blows.
Oh, thank goodness you said that.
Yeah.
Yes, Raymond Briggs was a man who is known. He's most famous for The Snowman and maybe for Fungus the Bogeyman. He did children's books that were well worth watching. He did children's books that were very high quality and never talked down to the children. But what he also did was deadly tear your eyeballs out serious adults books, comics again. And When the Wind Blows is one of those. You go ahead and describe it.
Okay, yeah. Like I said, I watched it one weekend, one night when I was working on a project for school, and it starts out with a David Bowie song called "When the Wind Blows," which is actually a really, really great song by itself. But coupled with the intro, you see this elderly man on the bus going home to his wife, and he looks across and there's like this young couple sitting together on the bus, and he's kind of charmed by it. And then you see, I think it's a newspaper, and it says, "Escalation between U.S. and Russia intensifies." And he brings home all these pamphlets about how to survive a mutual exchange between the Allied powers and the USSR. And he starts adapting his house to meet these standards. Well, I think it's his son or one of the neighbors comes over and says, "Oh, you don't have to worry about that. It's all just talk. It's all just talk." I think it's about 30 minutes in. They're listening to the radio, and all of a sudden the broadcast cuts out, and it says, and you keep getting these shots of a submarine underwater, and then an airplane, and you get these like 2-second shots of a submarine and airplane, and then finally the radio cuts out and it says, "There has been an exchange. Proceed to your shelters. There has been an exchange." and it is one of the most. It is actually all of a sudden the soundtrack. You hear like the stinger music of like them getting this shelter, and then all the sound cuts out as there is the explosion and the mushroom cloud.
Oh wow.
And everything, and I'm watching this. This is just a few months. This is actually just like under 8 months ago. Watching this, and I'm just like, I'm sitting there, and I stopped working, and I can feel my stomach start to literally like drop out. Like I can feel like I feel uneasy watching this, and then it cuts to them in their shelter, and they had an argument about whether it's 2 days or 2 weeks to stay in the shelter. It turns out it's 2 weeks, and instead of 2 days, so they're out in the fallout, walking around trying to carry about their normal day lives. All the water they saved up was vaporized in the blast. The wife makes a comment about how she can smell something cooking in the distance, and that she assumes it must be something that the neighbors are like having Sunday roast. So, like people survived. It pans out as they go back inside, and you just see their neighbors' houses are like obliterated and on fire, and like there's like evidence of fires from the blast, and it just slowly like, and then you basically like they start developing like bruises and rashes. Their hair starts falling out as they succumb to radiation sickness. And how the husband, he knows, like he basically suddenly realizes they are dying, and he keeps comforting his wife about how they're fine, and finally they just crawl into their shelter, and they basically start praying to God that everything will be all right. As it cuts out over this like obliterated countryside, credits start rolling, and at the very end, there's this Morse code being played over the credits. And it just says MAD, MAD, which was Cold War code and is used today to basically mean mutually assured destruction. And it ends. And
I never saw the film. I've never seen it to this day. I want to see it. But my school had the book. And I remember I was like, I'm 11 or 12 or something, and just found this book and went, oh, Raymond Briggs, I'll read this, and just never forgetting it. I didn't get all the way through, but I did get to the bomb, and the way that he does it is so interesting. In the original comic, you've got because they're like a middle-aged couple, you know, they're not young. I think they're pushing towards elderly, and they end up like doing. I think in the book, I seem to remember they're in a kind of duck and cover type position. I remember them like lying down. I could be wrong about that. But as they talk, he just starts screwing up the drawings, and he just starts like making them go weird. And then there's just it gets really odd. It's almost like you're reading a comic through like a dodgy connection, like static. And then you turn the page, and it's just static, just in the middle of the conversation. It's really. It really lasts with you, you know?
Yeah. And I do remember I looked up the reason why he had, like, I was curious because, I mean, it was the Cold War, and a lot of, like, made-for-TV movies, at least in the U.S., came out about that scenario. And I looked, because I was curious, because a lot of, like, the directors of these things, they create it because they didn't want that to happen. They wanted to show people the horror. And I remember reading part of that he wanted to show that horror, but also the pamphlets that were passed out on how to survive that scenario.
I'll be back in a sec.
Okay.
Like the pamphlets that were passed out had contradictory information.
Oh.
And so he wanted to, I think if I remember reading correctly, he actually wanted to partially address that. I may be completely wrong here, but no.
So that's why in the book they're confused about what to do. It's because they've read all these different things.
Yeah, all these different like sources.
That's interesting. Because I remember the only thing I like really took away from reading it, because as I say, I was very young, was it was where I learned the word commuters, because the man in it get one of they have these little mannerisms because he was very good at writing like middle-aged to elderly like English couples. He did one. I say English. I don't know what his family was. I assume they were English, but he did this one book about his parents, which I haven't read or seen the adaptation of, so I can't speak to it. But that was something that he did, and he was very good at it, and he did it again here. And so one of the man's mannerisms is that he's trying to talk about computers, but he's too old. He doesn't know what they are, and he thinks the word is computer.
Yeah. That actually was in the adaptation. I remember that.
Right.
And he did say that, and that was the one thing. Like I've seen some, and I'm very curious about Cold War, anti-nuclear film and media, and so because having grown up in that shelter of the wall came down, everything's mostly okay.
Yeah.
And I remember watching that, and all I could think was how sorry I felt for the couple. Like I didn't like everything else, all that lingered with me was just how bad I had felt for the couple. Not like the destruction or anything, but just everything that was happening to them. That's all I could remember was just the absolute.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? He takes something that most depictions of nuclear war or war of any kind is shown as like you see cities, you see worlds, you see like the news. It's done on a kind of a at least national, if not global, scale. Mm-hmm. Whereas this tackles it really well and really thoroughly, as I remember. It was a long time ago, but never steps out of this couple's vicinity. Like you're never more than a minute away from these two people, and they, as far as I remember, don't really meet anyone else once it's happened. Maybe they do, but I don't think they do. And they barely interact with anyone before it happened. They live a very isolated life, as you say. If they meet anyone, they have to go round to their house for them to meet them. So it's a very like home and hearth depiction of nuclear winter, and it's brilliant.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah.
Do you think that they tried to keep it away from any kind of political statements or racial statements by actually just making them generic human beings with no likes and dislikes, no allegiances any one way or the other? Because that would definitely aid in the emotional impact if there was no leaning towards,
That's an interesting question. Because obviously, not having seen it in ages or read it, I haven't seen it at all or read it in ages. I can't answer that directly. But what I can say is that Raymond Briggs wrote. I don't know what he's like, but he wrote very well. How shall I say this? His stories were very white. And everyone in it, of the ones that I'm aware of, were kind of were like this couple. They were sort of white. I'm tempted to say like comfortable working class.
Yeah. Okay.
I think is kind of where he was, but I don't know. And in the 80s, as myself, a white person in a comfortable household, these weren't things that I was yet aware of. I wasn't aware of my privileges at that time, and so it never really stood out. But looking back, and that was what the chunk of England that I'm from, as it were, the sort of that side of England was just starting to become aware of the existence of anything else. And so his books come from that time when that was how things were depicted. England was depicted as a white, middle class to sort of comfortable working class place, and his books fit into that. So it's difficult to say whether any statement was being made by that or not. I think that by doing that, he was. Sorry, what?
I'm feeling incredibly somber now.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's pretty heavy.
Maybe we should Maybe we should sort of fizz things up a bit by
Yeah, I think so. I think that was actually a very a fitting end to a conversation about what essentially was lighthearted entertainment. And I think in a way it does kind of sum up that, even something as terribly written as Transformers or something as emotionally impacting as a non-animated comic book, these mediums definitely impact us on gazillions of individual levels. So we should all hope that
that kind of quality, because that has remained. People that When the Wind Blows is that what it's called? When the Wind Blows? I can never remember.
Yeah.
That is not like ultra famous, but it is one of those things that comes up now and then, and people go, "Oh, do you remember that? The Snowman here in the UK is famous." And these are things that are high quality, and I feel as if, like, going forward, we should all hope that's what we might be seeing a return to, because those things were being made slightly before and slightly at a remove from the kind of American Saturday morning toys and marketing world of animation. And we have now stepped away from that to the extent that something like Avatar: The Last Airbender can exist, where you have like 3 exquisite series of a single ongoing story, with the expectation that the child watching it will see every episode in order, and a quite reasonable expectation of that, and that it can be done. And I think that, and now we have Korra, which has its ups and downs, but it kind of fits into the same mindset. And hopefully that means that we can start to see, well, not even start to see, we're already seeing a return to quality. There is great animation being made.
Speaking of quality, heavily emotional cartoons, have any of you seen Barefoot Gen?
No.
Oh, I've heard of Barefoot Gen.
It's extremely graphic at one part. It's the Hiroshima bomb, and when the bomb drops, they actually show you the graphics of what it would have looked like for those being hit. Direct full force of the bomb.
Wow.
It based on a true story. That there's interviews with the actual guy it happened to, and his story. Yeah. He survived the bomb because his school was a bit out of the way. He was excited about going to school that day because he was the leader for some game they were playing that day. So he rushed off to school nice and early. And then later that day, boom. Yeah. What was that? Sorry, Maddie?
There's no Wolverine that saved him.
No. That's a whole other thing.
So it sounds as if that could be watched alongside When the Wind Blows, and
we might all have to go educate ourselves.
Yeah.
There's
also,
speaking of somber cartoons, I do remember, because I grew up watching the Batman animated series from the 90s, that there were a few standout episodes, but has anyone ever seen Mask of the Phantasm?
Yes. That was the movie, was it not?
No, not yet, no.
They had Batman the Animated Series, which was supposed to be a follow-up to Tim Burton's film from 1989.
Yeah.
I followed the same tone. Well, they released Mask of the Phantasm, which was an animated movie set in the same animated universe, but it told a story as dark as the Christopher Nolan films.
Yeah. Am I the only person who didn't like Mask of the Phantasm? I'm going to have to go back and revisit that movie.
We'll have to have a Batman hangout one day, guys. We'll just go Battastic.
Yeah, there's a whole... We could discuss for 4 hours about how Batman and all the related...
For as influential as it was, the Batman animated series, I never... Well, no, I was going to say I never saw it, but that's a lie. It was on every Saturday morning, and I was watching the program in which it was shown. But it never rubbed off on me. I never, remembered it. And I think this is because, I had this prejudice when I was a kid, which was that if a cartoon was just about, men, just humans, I wasn't interested at all. So it had to be about funny little cartoon characters, or I wasn't interested.
Yeah.
And so things like Defenders of the Earth was on a lot, and I didn't care. Weirdly, He-Man, loved that. I don't know why that is an exception.
He-Man had magic in it. And Skeletor.
I guess that's it. Yeah, you had Skeletor, you had the Magic Sword, Ghostbusters, you had Ghosts, Thundercats, you had all the Thundercats-y stuff. So you could be like people, but if it was just people living in the real world but with superpowers or whatever, I wasn't into it. So Batman, never watched it. So when I started playing Arkham Asylum a few years ago, that was when we went, right, let's watch this. And my girlfriend used to watch it all the time, so she was like, right, we're going to get this. So we got the DVDs, or at least we got the first couple of seasons. We couldn't get the last one. And yeah, it's really good. But unfortunately, and we were planning to, go through it all and watch the films, Mask of the Phantasm and all of it. But we just didn't get that far, so I haven't yet seen it, but I will.
Yeah.
Speaking of robot... no, go, Zach.
I do highly recommend it because it does tell a Batman origin story that shows the consequences of him becoming Batman.
No, does
and
it?
How he actually at one point had the chance to lead a completely normal life, but he wanted to become a crime fighter that he actually drove away the only chance he had at actually leading a normal life.
Cool.
And it actually is really dark, and the ending is nothing can describe how wonderfully written the ending is. So
there you go.
I'll have to check that out. Now, speaking of robots, there's one movie that no one seemed to can remember exists. You often see a picture and it's all the famous animated robots all in one picture. You've got C-3PO, R2-D2, and all of the famous pop culture robots. There's this one particular robot whose name is Ivan, from a film, and it's a film about a spaceship that crashes. There's a woman on board, which is an adult woman, but a young adult woman, so 20-ish, and there's a robot, and it has it's got Viking horns, and it doesn't have a mouth. It's just got a round bit for a mouth, and it's all set in the snow. They've crashed on Earth or some planet, and the movie is the robot taking care of this woman. Do any of you know that?
No. I don't think so.
Sounds like a bad dream from a costume store.
Well, maybe this is something where maybe we need to look at a picture of it to know if we've seen it or not. What shall I Google for?
I don't know, because I don't know the name of what it's from. All I know is it's Ivan the robot.
Oh, that's easy.
Ivan...
no, it's not. I've typed in Ivan the robot, and that hasn't brought up anything obviously. What we're talking about.
I could do a rough sketch of what it looks like and hope.
Let me just consult my consultant, Abby. A cartoon in which a ship crash lands on Earth. Did you say?
I'm not sure.
A planet. It crash lands. There's a young woman and a large robot called Ivan with Viking horns that has to look after her and doesn't have a mouth and it just has a little round mouth. No. Yeah, I want to see it as well. Because there is one cartoon that, in fact, I think there are two that Abby's been trying to remember over the years, and we've been trying to place them. And there was one which we did figure out what it was, and it was this. Again, it's one of these things that you just randomly see on TV, and you wonder for the rest of your life what it was. And it was something to do with again, some people on a ship, and one of them was an old man, and one of them was a boy, and then gradually you start to figure out that they're the same person, and that the boy is going to go back in time and grow up to be the old man, and... It was a Mobius adaptation, apparently. Mobius, the comic artist, who died recently. All right, maybe not an adaptation, he just worked on it. But, so that was interesting. And then there was another one, which I can't remember anything about. Can you remember what the other one was?
On the Sci-Fi Channel once.
Can you hear her?
Vaguely.
Okay.
I really don't remember much about it.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess I'll let you guys know if we remember anything about it. So basically, the task is there's a cartoon that we can't remember anything about. What was it?
I like it.
Still on robots. Did any of you see Robo Story, a French cartoon?
think so. Let me just check. Robo Story. Yes, one word. No, that's not familiar. It looks French, doesn't it? It looks a bit Ulysses-y.
Yeah. There was a fantastic final episode. Brilliant. And there was a reveal, and the reveal was just saw it coming. Like when it first happened, it was an inconsistent reveal, but it was an excellent reveal.
Oh, I like the Robo Story Echo War. Oh, that's a good name. Might have to watch that.
It's probably all on YouTube.
It is. It is. I just found it.
Right. Yeah, I can't find that Ivan guy. Maybe if I just do a quick thing in, because I love Google image search now.
Oh yeah. Perfect for
Where
this sort of thing.
you can just drag and drop.
Yeah.
So hang on.
If you've got a picture of it. I'm just popping to the loo while you do that. See you in a sec.
Yep. So no one's heard of Ivan the Robot?
No.
Red eyes. It was wearing like a woolen, heavy woolen coat. I'm not a particularly good drawer, so I'm just going to do screen share at the moment. That is the roughest, worst pitch you could imagine, but that should be enough to spark someone's memory. No one?
No.
I had like a woolen... We've been talking for just over 2 hours. How do I... There we go. I think when he gets back, we'll just have one last little chat and then we'll wrap it up.
Sounds good.
That's okay with everyone?
Yeah.
How to draw this mouth was like a cylinder instead of a mouth that came probably jutted out about 2 inches from where his mouth would be.
Cartoon, yeah.
Definitely. I think anime, maybe. And I would love to find it again. It may not be the movie I thought it was that I've romanticized it as being in my head, but it's something I want to see just so I know it actually happened. And I know that it happened because I know my sister remembers it.
I got nothing.
Nothing at all there?
Nothing at all.
Dave, I'll do a screen share. This is a very rough drawing, but it's enough that it should trigger a memory.
Okay.
There we go. That there. That doesn't...
that's not familiar, no.
That's... Well, I'm going to save this and do an image search for it.
Will image search work with that?
Probably not.
It's worth a try, though, isn't it?
It's absolutely just worth trying, but... I think
image search usually works more along the lines of like the exact colors and things like that, doesn't it?
Yeah, which is why I'm trying to... Because I think that's all it's looking for. It's looking for colors and shapes.
Yeah, I think so.
It's not looking the same way a human mind would look for something.
No.
I found a robot from the Mazinga trilogy who shares a similar look called Gold Drake. One word.
Gold Drake.
Yeah, Gold Drake.
Yes, that is similar, but then it's also similar to a lot of other sort of anime titans, isn't it?
That's
Okay.
right.
That is not remotely similar. I can see from my rough drawing and that way you would think it was similar.
Yeah.
But if I had higher level skills as an artist, I could probably recreate it perfectly.
Better. There was snow in one of the pictures that I first saw.
Oh, okay. Also, this that circle part on his mouth, David, that's actually cylindrical shape. It's cut out about two inches from his mouth. What are you laughing at, Matthew?
This just popped up in front of me unexpectedly.
Right.
I love it.
So it's a kind of a funnel that he's got coming off him.
Yes. But no, like moving mouth.
No. Okay. Oh, I assumed it was going to be a speaker or something, but.
Oh yes, a speaker. Yeah, that would be a good one. I don't remember the robot said much of anything.
Oh. Oh gosh. No. There does need to be a kind of a central place you can go to and say, like, what is this cartoon I remember? Because this comes up quite a bit, and whenever I think of one, I sort of think, well, where will I go and ask about this? And I think in the past, there was a time when I started years ago now, nearly, not 10 years ago, but nearly, something like 7 years ago, 8 years ago, I started a thread on Something Awful, which was like, what can't you find on the internet? And they found some of the things that we were coming up with, but that's like one forum, one thread. There needs to be a place in this modern age. There needs to be a thing where you go for this.
Like findthatcartoon.com or something.
Well, kind of, but sort of.
Okay, here we go. Google is working its magic.
Trouble is, findthatcartoon.com sounds like there'd be 4 cartoons written on it, and someone made it like 9 years ago. Someone made the website and haven't updated it since.
All I've got is a bunch of geometric shapes in results.
There you go.
So,
oh well.
Man, my memory of this was triggered a while ago by a documentary I saw on science fiction films, and it was like Spielberg, Lucas, Cameron, all talking about films that influenced them. So maybe if I can find that documentary.
What was it actually? Was it on there?
Yeah, there was a clip of it on that documentary. If not for that documentary, I would have never have remembered that film.
Right. So what you need to do then is you need to find that documentary and then check the credits. There'll be a list of what the clips are from.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll have to go to my local. In Australia, it's JB Hi-Fi. In America, there's one called Best Buy. The British equivalent of that is I'll go to JB Hi-Fi and browse through all the DVDs in the special interest section. Anyway, we've been talking for almost 2 hours now. So, how does everyone feel about wrapping it up?
Don't ask me. I'm on your schedule.
Right. Well,
I
think we've solved some mysteries and shared some stories. I think we've done well.
I feel as if this is the sort of topic that doesn't finish ever.
No.
Like maybe we should revisit this in a while.
Yeah. Revisit it in another 20 years.
Yeah.
Just to see how cartoons have changed over the 20 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very. Yeah. You were going to say?
Oh, I don't know. I was just still going on. Go on.
Right.
Except in 20 years when we do this, we'll all be sitting there going, "Shh, okay, I gotta be quiet. The kids are asleep."
Thank you very much for joining us, Dave.
No problem.
For being our special guest this week. Do you have anyone that you would recommend for this show? We'll go with the whole YouTube thing and tag someone. Someone that.
Early on a Sunday morning, my brain will not work enough to figure out exactly who would be best. Well, I mean, what do you do the rest of the time? This one we're talking about cartoons. What do you talk about normally?
Last week was video games and movie adaptations of video games.
Oh my gosh! I should have been on that one as a big fan of the Super Mario Brothers film.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Despite and because of its many gaping flaws.
We probably will revisit that one again. We'll probably revisit all of the topics eventually. Like when we've run out of topics, we'll just go back and start again.
Well, look, just as a little addendum to last week's one, I just need to check. Are you aware that Mario is coming out on Blu-ray in a month or so? And I have pre-ordered it. Can't wait.
I think I actually saw it on the shelf in the. I think I actually saw the Super Mario Brothers the Blu-ray on the shelf over here.
No, you haven't seen. You won't have seen the Blu-ray yet because it comes out in a month for the first time, and it's you probably saw the DVD, which is a non-anamorphic print. The DVD is terrible, so to go straight from that sub original Star Wars level, going straight from that to pristine Blu-ray is going to be quite a thing.
That'll be interesting to watch when it's out in its full HD glory.
Yeah, it will, won't it?
The full cinematic screen ratio, so you get the black bars at the top and bottom on your 16:9. So that I will definitely.
I think it was a
16:9.
I think it was a 16. But I don't know.
We'll have to check it out when it comes out. Anyway, and our first episode, we just generally talked about pop culture. That's what the show is. Say that again. Sorry.
This is just episode 3, is it?
Yes. Yep.
Oh, wow.
So,
inaugural.
You're our very first guest. So, yeah.
Well, I can see myself popping back.
Oh, great. That'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah. If I ever get my... I mean, good heavens, it's difficult getting to do anything at 7. I think this is the first 7, like 7:30 on a Sunday morning that I've seen in 9 years. I am freelance, and those are not the kind of hours that we have in our calendar. But no, it was fun. I'll come and do this again. Yeah.
Is that Tintin on a poster behind you?
Yeah, it is. That was here. That's nothing to do with us. That was here when we moved in, and it was part of how we knew we should move in.
Nice.
Okay. Great.
Nice.
When we do revisit this topic, we should definitely talk about the Tintin movie.
Yes.
Right. So, next week is probably comic books is too similar to cartoons to do follow up straight away. Maybe. We'll
deliberate on it.
Yeah, we'll figure out at some point, and we'll have a solid thing next week. So, Maddie, Zachary, and myself are the 3 hosts each week.
I feel like I should pop in for that one. I've got lots to talk about with comics.
Bring it on.
I've got Wim. Oh, I'll tell you about Wim. The world of Wim. That was quite a thing. Anyway.
I'll post out the invite to you, Dave, and if you join us, you join us. If you don't, you don't.
If I happen to be awake.
Yep. All right then. So thank you for joining us again, and thank you, Zach and Maddie, for always being here week after week.
Thanks for having me.
We'll call that a day.
Have a good week, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.